Welcome back to Archean. This is episode 8 of the Series 1 playthrough. In the previous episode, I made an incorrect statement related to the ore scanner. When you set a distance to a channel, the actual information will not be available until the next tick. The other mistake was related to the pivot. I was using the value that I set the pivot to in servo mode as the direction, but that's incorrect. I should be extracting the location from the pivot unit itself because there is a delay of many ticks. If you tell it to move to a certain position, it takes a while to get there, and so that was incorrect. So what I just did is I created another hard drive and I made a copy of the previous hard drive and installed a new hard drive and made a new main and copied it in. So basically we can muck around with the code and we still have the original. Now obviously you could copy, save it into an editor outside of the game, but for this purpose of this video I decided to do it all within the game. Right, so we're going to make a number of changes to this code and work out some stuff and restructure it. So the changes required, besides the fact that I don't like the name toggle and decided to call it switch, is right now I'm doing a 360 scan. I want to have the ability to set a range, a scanning range, and have it go back and forth. And that just saves time when, because the submarine was moving around, so we don't want to waste time scanning behind us. Basically, once we kind of lock in and know about where we're going, we can narrow the range. So I think long term, maybe have a switch between a long scan, longer width scan, and a narrow scan. So once you kind of know where to go, you kind of point it in that direction and switch to narrow scan. That will speed up, reacquiring the ore. Because obviously, once you move, then the distances and directions no longer really apply if you're spinning around in the water. This means we need to take it out of servo mode and run it into, I guess the wiki calls it velocity mode. So we turn that off and it starts spinning around. Because we have a previous setting in there, so it's just using that speed. Now, I was playing around with max rotation speed, and all it seems to do if you're in velocity mode is to double the speed you set. So right now, you saw when I set the max rotation to 1, if I set it to 2, it just kind of doubles the speed. So it seems that's labeled incorrectly. And then I'm just kind of playing around with this. Okay, maybe I have a different value in here. So I'm just going to put a known. So now we're running in, I guess I call it speed. It should be velocity, but all right, so we set it to 0.01. And I have an error here. No, I didn't define. Now they're both set angles, but they're both channel 0. It just depends what mode you're in, how they apply. All right, so yep, I set it to 0.01, and that's just multiplying the value. So I guess it only really, I don't know what the purpose of that is. Kind of, I guess if you want to override the code, so the code sets it to a certain speed and you decide, well, I want to go faster than what the code programmed it for, I can just do that. I'm just going to set it to 1 and control it all from the code here. All right, so that's one thing figured out here. So we're going to put it in servo mode initially. No, well, actually, no, we don't. Flip it back off again. Oh, I just wanted to get it back to 0, pointing forward. All right, so the other thing, of course, is that given the fact that there's a 1 tick delay, we need to save the previous tick value, or every time we set a channel, we need to save the previous direction and the previous base distance. And the base distance is because every time we scan, we'll scan like n number of channels at one time. So the channel 0, I call that the base distance. All right, I'm actually going to write some functions to try. The mainline code is going to get a little large here, so I figure I throw some of this into functions. And so what this little function does is it remaps the default pivot angle into a negative 0.5 to a plus 0.5 range, with 0 being in the center. And the positive is to the right and negative is to the left. If I multiply that by 360, then that gives me the range of negative 180 to positive 180 with 0 in the center, facing forward, and to the right would be positive, so 90 degrees would be to the right and negative 90 would be to the left. And as I discussed before, the directional type of aspect of it. Now this function sort of reads the data and computes it and returns the offset. And then I went back and forth of just computing the degrees directly, not in the function. So I'm going to break all this out. Yeah, there's sections of the code where I don't have much to talk about. I'm just going to speed that up a little bit. Yeah, I decided that I need to make that a little more general purpose, so it'll pass in the angle, and that's and I forget to call the number in there that's required. There it goes. Right. So given any arbitrary angle from a pivot, convert it into what I call a forward offset. Probably has some better name available. So we take that, and just doing one line. My concern is I would do this more than one place. The other advantage of using a function, it sort of gives a descriptive of what you're trying to do versus having some maths kind of stuck in the middle of the code and going, what the heck is this math doing? So if you have a little routine with a nice name, it helps improve readability of the code a bit. I'm not sure what to call the degree version offsets. There's an offset based on an angle, and there's an offset based on degrees, and this code has to deal with both of them, so I have to give a different unique name. And I'm going to fix this up a little bit too. And we want to render what we're doing here. So what the plan is, I'm going to set this up to just take the current angle from the pivot, convert it into degrees, or 4 degrees as I call it, and render it on the console. And then I would manually just, or then I would just set the pivot to different directions, visually look at which way it's going, look at the console is indicating the right direction. Okay, so we put it in manual mode. I go, well, I can put it in manual mode, or I can just set it through code, which is just as easy to do. So if we would just set it here and set angle, since I think we're in servo mode. And we set 0, which we're in, or 2.5. Okay. And that's correct, because we are putting in the native angle. We're not, and the natively it only does positive numbers when you read from it. You can set negative numbers, but they can get converted and you only get positives. All right, so negative 45, that's correct. All right, and then pointing that way. So don't focus on the number, focus on where the thing pointing at. So it's pointing 45 degrees. So that's what I want. If I face forward at 0, it's pacing, to the northeast there. It's going to be 45. It faces to the northwest there. It'll be at negative 45. So the concept is if I'm if I'm positive 45 degrees off, then I'll just turn to the right. And if I'm, negative 45, then I turn to the left. And then you could put an auto steer mechanism to sort of lock in a little bit on the direction. Now this is just gravy. I could just do the math in my head. You could just put the raw angle up there and just learn over time what number goes where and just drive that way. But I figured we add a little bit of fanciness. All right, so the other thing we need to do is we scan, and there's different options of scanning. Like, for example, how many channels per tick? Where do we start scanning? Do we start like really close? Do we start far away? And then how far do we scan out to? So maybe I only want to scan out, a couple thousand meters and not have it keep looking forever for something. Because if it's like, 50,000 kilometers away, I'm not going there, hopefully. And then, of course, the scanning arc, for the arc, initially I'm going to do 45, negative 45 to 45. So basically a 90-degree sweep back and forth, and then so how fast we want it to run. So if someone wants to tune this out, the secondary usefulness of doing this is you don't have a bunch of numbers stuck in your mainline code. So when you see a nice description, you compare something, instead of comparing something to negative 45, you're comparing it to, min scanning arc, or minimum scanning arc, which is a little bit more useful. So I have a scanning enabled. I'll actually link this to a toggle switch at some point so I can turn the scanning on and off. But for now, I'm just going to hard code it to a 1 there. So imagine 43 will be tied to a switch at some point. All right, so if scanning enable, I'm looking at this going, yeah, this is getting worse all the time. Because there's no reason to manually compute the degrees. So I'm looking at this going, this is not what I want. Make this a little nicer. So I'm refactoring this code, and let's just move all this over here. So basically, this function OR scanner 4 degrees. So basically, get where the OR scanner is going to in 4 degrees, and we'll have it call the routine above it. There's a bug in line 41. We'll fix that. Because it doesn't compile and going, recursive, not calling recursive. All right, so we'll fix that. Put angle there, and then error in 64. Get rid of that. Okay, so now the mainline code's getting a little nicer, and so we call a nice function. We just get the degrees where we're facing to. Since we only have 1 degree, otherwise we don't have an angle involved. We can just get away with a simple name there. That's a mistake. I thought I was below. I scanned up, came back down. I saw the wrong degrees, and this is the right one. Okay, so this is the sweeping part. So effectively, we get where the pivot is facing. And if it's less than the minimum, let's set the velocity the other way. Now you can pull the, I think the rotation speed is available as an input. So I could pull the speed from the pivot. Just thinking about this. I just looked at the wiki, and there is channel 1 is output for speed, and I assume that speed is positive or negative, and thus what I could have done is, in this case, query the current speed and just invert it. So obviously, if we're too small, probably going the wrong way, and we'll flip it. In this case, I'm just going to guess at the direction. I mean, it makes sense. If we're minimum, we should go. You got to realize that by default, negative is, it's only positive values. So, and it spins counterclockwise. So if I got it wrong, I'll see it spinning the wrong way, and we'll just fix it. We got to turn off servo mode. Find the code thing again. All right, so this is a really good situation here for newer coders. I don't know what's going on. Okay, so here, okay, there it's scanning. We'll get to that, and it's going back and forth. So what happened was it had a really small number, and it was going really slow. And so it was moving. I just couldn't barely see it. If you look real closely in the video before this, it was slowly moving. So by making it faster, it made it easier to see. But if this has a problem of figuring out what's going on internally, you can always display things on the console or do print statements. So here I'm going to go ahead and put some information on the screen. So it's obvious it's moving, but I want to actually display where it's facing to. And we have an error. All right, so now we have the direction. Now it's going kind of fast. It is hitting, yeah, it's bouncing off those ends pretty quickly. Now, the actual internal logic is running at 25 cycles per second, so it'll get a lot more points than you can probably look at on the screen updating. So I slowed it down just to double check it's hitting the right edge. And yep, looks like it. So while that's running back and forth, I'm going to go ahead and this is at 5x, type in some comments. And then we'll all right, so we have that. So now we have ability to scan back and forth in an arbitrary arc and an arbitrary speed. So that's one part of the problem solved. And we could have a toggle switch if we wanted to. I guess would missional work do if I move the min-max out of constant into working variables, then I can have them switch based on a toggle switch. We have narrow and wide. That'll be a future change. And then I'm just sitting here writing a few comments. If I can spell to do here. A little thing and kind of thinking out what I'm doing here. And one technique is to sort of block in the code areas. So looking at additional constants we're going to need for. All right, so this is a config for the actual scanning. Probably should call line 15 comment or pivot arc, and then this would be or scanning parameters. And another 5x speed up, just typing. So we're going to have the minimum distance, the maximum different configuration, and then how many channels we're going to process per tick, and then the delta between channels. So, right now it's listed as 10 channels and 10 meters between channels. A couple comments about that. And then we have the actual the OR scanning state. Is it enabled? The last distance, we need that because when we pull the OR information, now OR last direction is really OR last base direction. I didn't want to get too verbose. I'm looking up there, looking at there, trying to figure out how to organize this block of code down here. All right, so the next thing we need to do, we actually need to scan. So we're going to kind of do a little bit of functionality, then test that, and we'll add to it. All right, so based on number of the channel count, we repeat that many times. We start with the base distance and go back and forth trying to grab the number, so I'm to type everything over and over. So we have the base distance plus the current channel multiplied by the delta between channels. That gives us the actual distance, and then we set the channel for that. So one thing we need to do is we need to remember. This doesn't need to be put here. I can put it below this logic, but before I update the last distances, I keep looking up for what I'm calling stuff. I'll be moving things around a little bit as I kind of place them around. All right, so we also have the the base distance, and we don't actually set that. It's set to 0, and so I want to set that to an initial value. And we'll set that to the minimum distance. All right, so we have trying to set it all up, and we scan. We want to grab the last distance and direction. So basically the last distance will be the, yeah. Effectively it's the last base distance. I probably renamed that. And then the last direction. This is basically, we're going to set this information, but we can't read it to the next time. So next time these last will be the last. As you see, this starts to get a little more complicated here. So in the scanning, first thing we want to do is we want to get the information the order information from the previous. Now, okay, this is an event-driven system, and that means everything gets read and set, and nothing changes until the next tick, until you leave this routine. So the order really doesn't matter. You can read the information at any time within this tick, and you can set the channels any time in this tick. That's fine, because nothing changes. The physics engine is not doing anything while you're sitting inside this tick. And so basically, the various channels are set and read. Then then the engine runs and updates everything, and then you recycle over and over. But in this case, we'll make it more the expected flow of code. I mean, you got to order them one way or another. So I might as well just this way is good as the other way. But saying it doesn't really matter in an event-driven system. Now it does matter if you set something like or last distance in the wrong location. That would matter. And I'm going to hard code this for gold. You can make this more variable for other elements, but I don't want to get too fancy, and we'll save that for a future episode. Now there is a bug here which I don't fix in this episode. I'll have to do a little cleanup. We don't get it 100% done with in this episode because it was dragging a little too long, and we'll do some cleanup in the next episode. But this is the bulk of the code. And so the issue here is that on the very first tick, I'm going to query this information. And if the OR scanner was just added, it would return blank and not hurt anything. But if I was sitting here mucking around, or someone else was mucking around and changed the code, then when I read this, it would contain whatever was left over in the scanner. And so it could find gold at this point and go, oh, you found gold at 10 meters away facing this direction. That's incorrect. So what should happen here is that there should be some logic, basically like a first tick logic, and not to actually perform this code on the first tick. Now, in theory, it's what the long-term code will do. The code will recycle. So once it finds gold, because you can be moving around, once it finds a certain direction, it just recycles, reset the base back to 10 and go back. So it would correct itself even if I didn't fix it. So here's something funny. I can't find the numbers. Like, where are the numbers? And I'm pushing. Is the line too long? I lost my line numbers. So I'm going, there's a bug in the editor. And so I screw around trying to find the stupid line numbers. Because typically in the editor, if you go all the way to the left-hand side and just kind of move the mouse, the screen would scroll. But that doesn't happen here. If you notice the scroll bar, there's a gap on the left-hand side corner there, or left side edge. And all I had to do is just move the scroll bar over to get the numbers, but I couldn't figure out why the numbers weren't there. So I'm going to 5x this F around to try to figure out why I don't have numbers anymore. And I want you all to see this in case someone else hits the same issue. All right, so now we can make forward progress again. So we're getting the information from the previous tick, as we said, that really shouldn't run on the first tick. We'll fix that later. All right, so we get the gold. If there's gold, if it's not blank, convert it to a number, multiply by 100, we got a percent. And then I'll just do a print on the bottom there. And you see it's running right now. Although I get bored if it's running, start moving code around, which will reset the whole thing. The scan flip. The scan flip is, so I need to know when I do a range, like if I do from like 10 meters out to 200 meters or so, I need to know when I have to increment that and go from 200 to 400, 400 to 600, so on. So I figure I would leverage the scan flip. Why did I put a 2 there? That should not be scan flip 1. Okay, 78 had a typo. And so the concept was when I do the scan stuff, I'm kind of keep moving things around, trying to figure out where to stick this stuff. And when it bounces from one end to the other, I can increment the base range at that point. So we'll just track whether we flip the direction of the scanner. And yes, 80, no, what line? 94 should be scan flip equals 1. Now I check if it's non-zero, so it doesn't hurt anything. I just realized I had a typo. Okay, so the problem now is, even though it's scanning and going around, it's not increasing the range. So it's only scanning out 200 meters, and from previous episode we know it's about 1,000 meters out. So we're not going to find gold until we can change that. All right, so if we hit a scan flip, let's increase the base distance. This will happen on the next tick, because you already applied the channels for this tick. And so for the next tick, we'll go ahead and move that out. Every time I hit save, it starts running. Okay, got a typo. And move things around again. Now, another little weird issue here is with the scanning speed. So the scanning, I improved the scanning speed, and then all of a sudden it started going faster. And that's because I did initially set the scanning speed to a certain distance, and it only applied it once it hit the edge, and that's why it was going slow and all of a sudden went fast. So we fixed that. All right, so scanning. So we're back down to the information issue. Is that I don't know how far this is. It running? Is it incrementing the base? I don't know. So we're going to add some additional information here. The distance, so we can make sure it's really base distance. Base there. And we want the last one. Because we already updated the other one. And I have the double, I do the double dollar a lot. I'm looking at it misspelled, and it's only just $2 signs are there. Okay, so, and of course I overwrite the line, and I hit the wrong key. Let's move that out. All right, so now we have, yeah, it's going by 200s, which is what expected. The scanning is working as expected. Let's format a little nicer. Okay, now you got to realize that this thing is sending out rays. And the further you go out, if you move too fast, you can actually miss ore by just kind of skipping over it, because the arc will get the distance between the arcs get further as you get further out increases. So you're kind of balancing speed versus accuracy. So now we know there's ore on gold nearby, and we missed it because the fact that it's actually my scan range right now is too narrow. So it's sort of not missing that one spot. But I figured I'd let it run for a while and see if I'm just going to find gold sooner or later, I assume. Yeah, we'll let it kind of cook for a while. And we found some gold. And we're just printing out right now. We're not doing anything fancy on the console yet, so we need to address that. So I'm going to sit here and let it run. This is at 5x again. I'm letting it run a little further, and then I'm going to change the scan range. So fortunately, they're constants. So we'll crank those way up for now. And so now we're scanning back and forth. And boom, we found gold at only 810 meters away. And here's the other batch of 110. So even, I think I talked about before that if your scan deltas are too far away, you can easily miss something the further you're away from something. And that's why I think we found some gold even closer than last time. Now, one way to deal with that is to change the speed based on distance. So basically, the further you get out, you slow down the scan to get more accuracy. Okay, so we're just printing the information out. See, it was -49, and we were doing only -45. So we just missed the edge there for that. Now, once it gets mounted on this, I'll replicate this on the sub, and then the sub can, of course, move around. And once we know about which way to go, then we can just keep the range narrow. So most likely, I said, I'll have a narrow, wide range switch. And once you figure out about where to go, you just switch it on the narrow and speed things up. All right, so I decided at this point to kind of stop and continue on in the next episode. So until next time, see ya.